Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would yield my 5 minutes to the distinguished member and future governor of the state of North Dakota, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you. Where are you from in South Dakota?
Millbank,
Oh, fantastic.
so not far from your border.
90% of the people who are in custody in the federal system will be released.
That's correct.
I mean, that's why we're here, and that is why it's important. And you inherited a mess. I mean, you inherited a mess. But we walked through, and I think, and there's not a lot of great stories over the last 5 years, but I think there are some, and I think it can also help. The CARES Act recidivism rate was 3.7%. That's roughly 10% of BOP at large. And it's statistically no different than traditional home confinement. Are my numbers accurate?
The recidivism rate for CARES Act was about 4.4% is what I have, yes.
And recidivism rate for First Step Act is about 35 to 37% lower than the BOP at large?
That's correct.
So, I mean, these programs work. And I think, so when we're talking about staffing, and I'm going to ask about the OPM salary thing in a second, because there's another side to this, right? What percentage of people who you hire are gone within the first year? Do you know?
You know, I don't have that number, but it is an area of concern because we were able to onboard in 2022, but we onboarded fewer than left. So the good news for this year so far is that we've onboarded 1,400 and it's more than have left.
And I appreciate you saying you support the BOP oversight bill because it's not often we have somebody in here. I mean, there's some strict measures in there. You talked about augmentation and all of those different issues. But if you're hitting overtime at 5 o'clock on Wednesday and you're committed to working another 2 hours a week and you have 2 kids at home that you haven't seen and you're working in a dilapidated facility and people have to be locked up all weekend because you don't have enough staff to get them in there, you know what that creates? Well, one, it's a terrible working environment outside of the pay, and that's exists. It also creates recidivism. And there are things the federal system does really well, and one of them is pretrial release. It's fascinating to me because it's almost counterintuitive. It's less confrontational, more rehabilitative, life choice skills, all of those different things. The problem is nothing you get taught in pretrial release, you remember 10 years later when you get a 10-year minimum mandatory. And some of it is geographical, but one of the things the federal prison system I don't think does very well, and I think we have an opportunity to increase on it, is reentry. The tools for reentry, we have a bill with David Trone just to give everybody a BOP ID, like to set up a bank account or to buy a bus ticket or to get home. And so when we're talking about the First Step implementation, we talk about what happens when they get out. But what are you guys doing to implement, and this becomes more important because a lot of times people are not incarcerated locally. So what are you doing to meeting the good time credits and outside of staffing, because I'm assuming staffing is a challenge to this, what are you doing to increase the ability of the people who qualify for video calls with family, telephone calls with family, all of those different issues? Because we know, and the data supports, the more you do that, the less likely they're gonna reoffend when they get out.
So you covered so much there. So
I would
of
take
course,
everybody's
as the
time.
director of BOP and as the former Inspector General of the good state of Oregon, of course I support the Oversight Act. I understand the important role of the Inspector General, and he and I work closely. As it relates to release IDs, I've had met with Congressman Trone many times. I'm proud to report to the committee that all BOP facilities now have the ability to issue an ID, so individuals are actually leaving. In fact, since December of 2023, we've generated over 6,500 release cards. As you well know, that's an incredible barrier to reentry. And as it relates to staffing inside our institutions, when I walk the halls of our institutions, and we have great representatives from the union here in the room, they're exhausted. They tell me exactly the anecdotal stories that you just shared, that the families have pickup times figured out and who's cooking figured out, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons messes it up regularly because of mandated overtime.
Yeah, we want to hold people accountable.
Yes.
We want them to serve their sentence.
Yes.
But ideally, we'd prefer when they get out, they don't reoffend again right away.
That's right.
That is the officer safety. So, and this is for everybody. This is the only adult population that the federal government is in charge of everything.
Right.
Like, we have taken care, custody, and control of them. So and whether it's a facility and everybody looks at it and says, I don't care what kind of room violent criminals in, but the employees do. And if you're working in something that's 30 years old and all across it, all of that, and if we don't retain employees, because it's not just the number of employees, it's how many years' experience they have. And that is the single best way to deliver all of the things we need to deliver and also ensure safe and secure society. With that, I yield back. I'm sorry.